Everybody, welcome to ARE Live. I'm Patrick Finnegan, producer of ARE Live here at Black Spectacles, and I'm joined with architect Chris Hopstock, who's going to review several practice management mock exam questions. We're going to go through questions that cover PCM knowledge and skills related to disclosing conflicts of interest in public advocacy, calculating not to exceed fees with contingency, choosing fee structures for different project phases, identifying non-billable versus billable work tasks, and determining utilization rate from weekly timesheets. If you're joining us for the first time, Black Spectacles is a leader in ARE prep. We work with learning scientists and architects to ensure you're studying the right content and that you retain it so you can pass on the first try. We've built everything you need to pass the exams, including new video lectures with motion graphics and 3D animation, practice exams that are as close to the real thing as you can get, flashcards, quizzes, and virtual workshops. And they're all built upon a curriculum that ensures you're learning the right content. And they all work together with our custom-built platform to ensure that you retain that information so you remember it for the exams. It's why our pass rates are 50% higher than the national average and why our members report passing in half the time of the national average. Over on our Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook social channels, we post daily mock exam questions. So if you don't already follow us, I'd suggest that you do. We're at black.spectacles on Instagram and TikTok, and just Black Spectacles on Facebook. Our next ARE Live will be on June 18th, where we'll be covering a PPD mock exam. You can go to blackspectacles.com/podcast to sign up, or you can go to our community page where we have a thread for this ARE Live session, and right in that thread is a link to join the next session. We offer a referral program for firms and schools where if you introduce us to your boss or HR, and if they sign up, we'll give you a $250 gift card. To participate, follow the instructions on blackspectacles.com/group-referral. We also offer a refer a friend program where you can sign up to receive a customized discount code to save your friend 15% off any membership, and you'll receive a $50 gift card of your choice when they redeem. You can go to blackspectacles.com/referral to participate. And we're going to be engaging exclusively on our online ARE community. So head over to community.blackspectacles.com, and right at the top, you'll see we've pinned a thread called ARE Live PCM Mock Exam May 2025. If you have any questions as we're going through ARE Live today, post your questions there and we'll answer them live as we go through today's session. And everyone who posts in that thread today will be eligible to win a free Black Spectacles t-shirt. Literally, all you have to do is go over to community.blackspectacles.com and say hi, and you're registered. And of course, don't forget to stay tuned until the end of the episode to see if you've won. Our community forum isn't just for ARE Live questions though. In fact, we also launched a new podcast called Licensure Stories, which you can find on our ARE community, YouTube channel, or your favorite podcasting service, where our founder interviews recently licensed architects to learn about their struggles and successes so you can learn how they did it. You can check out Licensure Stories on our ARE community or YouTube channel. And with that, I'd like to welcome today's guest, Chris Hopstock. In addition to working with us here at Black Spectacles, Chris is an architect based in New York. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks for having me, Patrick. I'm particularly excited about this episode because I think practice management is probably my favorite division of the ARE. You know, everybody's heard that the stigma that architects are not good business people, and I think this division of the ARE is an attempt to remedy that problem, and I think that's really important. You know, being good at this topic allows us to provide really high-grade professional services for our clients and just raises the bar for the profession as a whole. So with that said, let's just jump into question one. An architect's longtime client recently requested that the architect attend a conference at City Hall to speak on behalf of the merits of a proposed change to the city's zoning ordinance. The proposed rezoning would benefit the client because the client owns 2 lots in the area that is being considered for upzoning. The client mentions to the architect that they'd like to hire them to design these projects if the upzoning is enacted. Which of the following is true? A, there are no ethical issues posed by the client's request. B, the architect should decline the client's request because it creates a conflict of interests. C, the architect may speak at the conference but must disclose that they have an economic interest in the rezoning. Or D, the architect should decline the request because they're not qualified to speak at the conference. So PCM is going to have a few questions about ethics. The ARE guidelines mention ethics in the first sentence about the PCM exam. They say that this division will assess objectives related to the management of architectural practice, including professional ethics, fiduciary responsibilities, and so on and so forth. So I think you should practice these types of questions because they're relatively easy if you understand the AIA Code of Ethics and the NCARB Model Rules of Conduct. Both of those documents are relatively short to read and they can be found online for free. And we've got some great videos breaking down each one with lots of examples to help you master them. The trick to these questions is that you really need to understand the scenario and figure out which ethical rule applies to the situation. So here we're talking about an architect making public comments about architectural issues. If you've read either of these ethical documents, you'll recognize that there are some requirements about doing that. That's because architects are obviously professionals, and we're just held to a higher standard when we're making public comments about our profession, the same that doctors commenting on public health or just health-related topics would be held to the same higher standard than just an average person doing so. So if you look at the AAA Code of Ethics, Rule 2.301, it says members making public comments on architectural issues shall disclose when they are being compensated for making such statements or when they have an economic interest in the issue. NCARB Model Rule of Conduct 3.2 essentially says the same thing. An architect making public statements on architectural matters shall disclose if the architect is being compensated for making such statements or has an economic interest in the issue. So in this question, we have an architect being asked to speak publicly about an architectural issue and a client who has told them that if the upzoning is enacted, the architect might gain some projects out of it. So basically, the architect has an economic interest in this upzoning being approved. Just looking at the choices here, given what we just said, we can rule out choice A. There's definitely an ethical issue posed here. We can also rule out choice D while we're at it, just because architects are, of course, qualified to talk about zoning in a public forum. So the question is, should the architect decline this request, like choice B says, or can they speak at this conference as long as they disclose the economic interest, like choice C says? Well, like we talked about, both of these ethical documents say that as long as the architect discloses it, they may speak about these types of issues, even if they have a public interest. So if you were going to do this and speak at this conference, you might, just paraphrasing, say something like, you support the subzoning, it's going to create a bunch of new housing, jobs, etc. And your office is looking forward to hopefully working on some of these projects with developer XYZ. So with that said, choice C is the correct answer here. And let's move on to question 2.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Not seeing any questions in the community right now. If you guys have any questions during the session, you can go to community.blackspectacles.com and there's a thread for this ARE live session. You can drop them in there and then I'll bring them up live to Chris, but we can go on to the second question.
All right, the principal of a small firm is preparing a proposal for a feasibility study. The client has requested an hourly not to exceed fee for the project. The principal has determined that the project will take 1 week to complete and will be staffed by a project manager and designer who will work full-time in the project during the 1 week. The following is known about the 2 employees. The project manager has an hourly billable rate of $175 per hour and a 75% utilization ratio. The designer has a $100 per hour billable rate with an 85% utilization ratio. And the principal will also devote 3 hours to this project at a billable rate of $250 per hour. The firm standard is to add 15% contingency to all not to exceed fees. What not to exceed fee should the principal propose? Round to the nearest $50. Choice A is $13,500. Choice B is $7,650. Choice C, $10,800, or choice D, $9,400. So we need to understand some key terms here in order to do the math correctly for this fee proposal. So let's go through them. Billable rate. This is the amount that's actually charged to clients. It includes your overhead and profit. It's different from hourly rate, which is just simply an employee's salary and their benefit package, like their health insurance and paid time off and things like that. So this question, we're given billable rates, which makes the question simpler. We could just use those numbers for our fee calculation. If we were given hourly rates, they would also have to give us a net multiplier. And we would multiply the hourly rate by the net multiplier and come up with the billable rate. The next one is utilization ratio. This is the percentage of an employee's time that is spent on billable work over a given time period. In this case, we're talking about 1 week. So for example, the project manager in this question has a 75% utilization ratio. This means that of the 40 hours in the work week, they spend 75% of those hours, or 30 hours, on billable tasks. The other 10 hours might be spent on some non-billable tasks like marketing, mentoring, team meetings, and so on and so forth. And then finally, contingency. Contingency is an amount that's added to a subtotal to account for the unknown. So let's say, you've estimated that this project is supposed to take 1 week to complete. Maybe the project bleeds over into Monday. Your contingency would cover that sort of an unknown situation. So in this question, the firm adds a 15% contingency. That's relatively standard. Something between 10 and 20% is pretty common. So with those definitions, we can go ahead and start thinking about the math here. We need to determine how many hours each employee is going to work on the project, multiply that by their billable rate, add those billable rates up to find a subtotal, and then we're going to add the contingency to find the total fee proposal. Patrick, if you can go to the next slide, we'll go through the math. All right, so let's look at the project manager first. We're going to take their $175 per hour billable rate, multiply that by 40 hours and their 75% utilization ratio. That is going to give us a total for the project manager of $5,250. So we're going to charge that amount to the client for the project manager's work during this 1 week. Similar for the designer, $100 per hour, 40 hours in a week. We're going to multiply by their 85% utilization ratio. It's a little bit higher, which is typical for designers. That's going to give us a $3,400 fee for the designer for that 1 week. And then the principal was given to us a little bit differently in the question. It just said that they're going to spend 3 hours on the project at $250 per hour. We can simply multiply those two numbers together, and we're going to charge $750 for the principal's time. So we've got what we're going to charge for each employee of the firm. We need to add those numbers up and then apply our contingency. So there are a couple of different ways you could do this. The way I would do it in real life and also on the ARE is to just make this math as quick as possible. So I would type into the calculator the 5,250 plus 3,400 plus 750. That's going to give you a subtotal of 9,400. And then rather than multiplying that by 0.15, finding the contingency, and then adding that back to the 9,400, I just multiply by 1.15 to do this all in one step. That's going to give us $10,810, which if we round to the nearest 50, like the question says to do, that's going to give us $10,800, which correlates with choice C. And if there are no questions in the community, I guess we can move on to question 3.
Yeah, just one question. It was actually about two of the documents you actually referenced earlier. Was that the AIA Rule of Ethics and the NCARB Code of Conduct? Or what were those two documents you referenced previously?
Yeah, it's the AIA Code of Ethics and the NCARB Model Rules of Conduct. So like I said, if you just Google those things, you'll find them available online. The AIA Code of Ethics is actually a totally voluntary thing for architects to comply with. If you're an AIA member, you're expected to adhere to their Code of Ethics, but it's not actually a law. Like, you don't have to comply with that if you're not an AIA member. The NCARB Model Rules of Conduct are a model document that NCARB produces that it encourages each of the 55 jurisdictions in the United States to adopt or amend and adopt as their ethical standards for architects. So in practice, your jurisdiction's requirements could be slightly different from that rule, but given that the ARE is a national exam, that document is what would be considered the law of ethics for architects on the ARE.
Gotcha. And then I've got two questions that's kind of like breaking down on the math of this one. So the first one is why would you need to multiply at the utilization rate? Because people are saying like their understanding is that they would be going to work full-time 40 hours a week on this for that 1 week. So can you answer that? And then another one is also around why would you multiply by 1.15 instead of just 0.15?
Okay, great. So the first question, why are we considering utilization rates? So we're given billable rates here, which already factor in each employee's utilization ratio. So an employee's, let's take the project manager, for example. the project manager is being billed at $175 per hour. Well, their actual hourly rate, like their salary, is probably like $60 an hour or something like that if you were to put it into hourly instead of a yearly salary, right? So what does all that other money go towards? It goes towards paying for their non-billable time. It goes towards keeping the lights on in the office and a whole bunch of other things that the office, you know, needs to run, like marketing and printed materials and so on and so forth. So when we're talking about billable rates, they already account for that not unused, but that non-billable time. So we'd be double dipping if we didn't account for the employee's utilization rates in this question. The second one about why did I multiply by 1.15, that's just a quicker way of adding a contingency or any type of percentage to a total. So if you were to multiply the 9,400 by 0.15, I forget exactly what number you're going to get, but you're going to get something like $1,200 or something like that. That's the actual amount of contingency you're going to charge, but you still need to add that back to the 10,000. You still need to add that back to the subtotal, which was $9,400. So you have an extra step. If you just add the 1 in front of the 0.15, it does that extra step for you. It adds the whole in your multiplication and just saves you 10, 15 seconds, which on the ARE is important, I think.
Perfect, thanks. And if anyone else has any questions about this question later, just drop them in here and we can, I'll bring it up at the end of the session, but we'll roll on to question number 3.
All right, a project manager is preparing a proposal for services. When discussing the project with the client, with whom the architect has worked with on several past projects, the PM took the following notes about the scope of services. Prepare feasibility studies for various sites under consideration by the owner. SD through CD phases, similar level of detail to previously completed projects, 6 months, and bidding/CA phases, 18 to 24 month time frame. Which fee structure is appropriate for the project? Hourly not to exceed for the entire project. B, feasibility study hourly, SD through CD fixed fee, bidding/CA hourly not to exceed. C, feasibility study hourly not to exceed, SD through CD fixed fee, and bidding/CA hourly. Or D, feasibility study fixed fee, SD through CD hourly not to exceed, and bidding/CA fixed fee. So this type of question comes up very often. You're given a scenario and asked what fee structure makes the most sense. It's something that if you're managing an architecture firm or even a project manager, you might be doing a lot of figuring out what the most what fee structure makes the most sense, both for you and for your client for a given project. So different fee structures have their pros and cons. Let's go through a few that are mentioned in this question. Fixed fees make sense for projects or portion of projects where the scope of work is clearly defined. So with a fixed fee, you're going to need to estimate how long the task is going to take, apply your hourly rates or your billable rates actually, and come up with a total fee. So think about it. That's really hard and maybe impossible to do if you don't know exactly what's going to be required of you. So just looking back at this question, for these feasibility studies, it's noted that you're going to be doing them for various sites. So how can you determine how many sites you have to consider? You really can't. So a fixed fee is just going to put you at risk of maybe losing money on this phase of the project. You could be asked, maybe you start this feasibility study with the client, they find one site and it's just a home run site, it's perfect, and you only have to evaluate that one site. That's great. Conversely, you could end up evaluating 10, 20 different sites for them. Like, there's just no way of knowing how many sites. So a fixed fee really wouldn't make sense for that portion of the project, given it's the unknowns. The next type of fee structure is hourly, which is great for you because you can simply charge for any time you spend on the project. There's no estimating. You don't need to figure out how long it's going to take to complete. You just take your timesheets at the end of the billing cycle, whether it's weekly or monthly, submit those to the client in the form of an invoice, and you get paid for every hour that gets spent on the project. Clients don't love this, obviously, because they have no idea what the total is going to be. So it's kind of only used in pretty certain scenarios where there's a really unknown scope of work. To solve the hourly rate issue and just being so unknown for clients, there's an hourly not to exceed pricing, which is essentially the same as hourly. You bill for your time spent, but you calculate a cap or maximum that you would charge the client. If you go over that maximum estimate, you're not going to get paid for any additional hours. So it gives your client some understanding and clarity about the max that they would spend, and they appreciate that. You just have to be able to calculate some sort of a cap that would make sense for you, so you're not going to end up losing money. This fee structure is good for pretty somewhat unknown scopes of work, like in this question, the CA phase that you can put a cap on. So here, the CA phase is listed as 18 to 24 months. So you can simply calculate your not to exceed price based on the 24-month time frame. And then if if CA takes a little bit less, the client saves some money. And if it takes more, you'll have the opportunity to negotiate some additional services. So with that said, let's recap a little bit here. The feasibility phase here is pretty unknown. Like I said, you could be evaluating one site, you could be evaluating 20. So you really should charge hourly for that type of work. Even if the client gives you some pushback, you could put a cap of 10 sites or 20 sites on it and then apply a not to exceed price, but the question doesn't mention anything about that. So hourly is going to make the most sense for the feasibility study. The design phase sounds like you can estimate it with pretty good accuracy. You've done these types of projects with this client before. It's listed as 6 months. And I think for that type of thing, fixed fee makes the most sense. You both have certainty. They know what they're going to pay. You know how much you're going to make if the project goes to completion, and a fixed fee really makes a lot of sense there. CA is a sort of in the middle. It's kind of unknown, like it always is, but you've got the maximum length there that you can take, and if it goes beyond that, charge some additional services. So an hourly not to exceed makes the most sense for the bidding and CA phases here. So all of those align with choice B, which is the correct answer to this question.
Thanks, Chris. One just kind of overview question for number 3, and that's what study materials what could people review for question 3?
Yeah, we've got some great videos on the different types of fee structures with examples about what types of projects would make them make those fee structures applicable to the project. We've got a really good chart in our videos and also in our lecture slides as well that breaks that down for you. If you want to go to the first source resources for that are listed in the ARI handbook, the Architect's Handbook of Professional Practice is the go-to for a lot of the PcM exam and PcM exam. So you can find some more information on the types of fee structures in that book.
Gotcha. And I'm asking, we have 2 more questions actually on back on question number 2, but it's actually kind of around, the first one I'm gonna do is actually kind of around not to exceed, which we did have in question number 3, but in question number 2, there was specific language used, which was not to exceed fee. Is there ever a condition where this is not the case? Will the math be different between not to exceed and its opposite, or something like that?
Okay, so if you were the math, if this question was asking you to calculate a fixed fee, the math would be essentially the same. Oftentimes, the number that you're going to use for a not to exceed is what your fixed fee would be, or a little bit more. Maybe you add some more contingency. So the math in this question is pretty much how you would determine any type of fee that you're going to charge. This question just happens to be talking about a not to exceed fee. It's sort of not relevant to the question, I would say. The math is the way you do it, regardless of fee structure.
Cool. And then one that's just kind of a clarification question. Is utilization rate the same as direct expense multiplier?
I don't know that I've heard the term direct expense multiplier. With some of these financial terminologies, there might be different ways of calling it. Your firm might call it one thing, when another firm might call it something else. For the purposes of the ARE, it's always called utilization rate, and that's what I think you're going to expect to see on the ARE. Sorry, Patrick, what was the phrase that you said?
Is utilization rate the same as, quote, direct expense multiplier?
Direct expense multiplier. It doesn't sound like it to me, but
Okay.
again, I'm not familiar with that term.
Cool, gotcha. And then just 2 more questions, and this is around, I think, number 3. But the first one is, can you just give a quick explanation between the difference of hourly and hourly not to exceed?
Yeah, for sure. So with hourly, it's very simple. You just give the client your billable rates, a list of your billable rates for each employee or employee type at the firm, and tell them we'll send you an invoice in a month. And it's going to be we're going to take these billable rates, look at our timesheets, figure out how much time the office spent on the project, do some multiplication, and that's what the client's going to pay. They have no idea if it's going to be $1,000, $10,000, $50,000. There's just no clarity on their end or on anybody's end about how much it's actually going to cost. With an hourly not to exceed, you bill them hourly, you bill them the same way, but you say, okay, we're going to bill you hourly. We'll send you an invoice in a month. The most that invoice is going to be is $20,000, let's say, or whatever number you come up with. What that means is you're gonna bill hourly. Let's say your average hourly rate is $100 an hour. You can bill up to 200 hours. I think I did that math right. 200 hours for that project before you hit that not to exceed number. So if you bill 150 hours, you would charge them $15,000. The not to exceed comes into play with if you've actually spent, let's say, 250 hours on the project. You're not going to bill for the 250 hours because that would put you over the not to exceed number. You're just going to bill the $20,000 in our example. So it puts you at a little bit of risk of going over the not to exceed number. If you go over that number, you're not going to get paid for the hours spent. You have to sort of eat it as a firm. But the key with a not to exceed is to set the number to a number where you're comfortable that you're not going to go over that number.
Perfect, thanks. And two more things actually. So we got a couple people that posted in about that direct salary multiplier. So I'm actually gonna drop that. Thank you. I'm gonna drop. It's not the same as the utilization rate, but someone just dropped a link to the ARE NCARB community, and okay. I'm gonna post that in our community at community.blackspectacles.com, where you can see kind of the explanation on direct salary expense multiplier on that. And then Chris, can you just help me out with just a quick way that you would approach these questions? So you got 2 minutes on average to be going through these questions on the ARE test. How do you take in all the details? Because you were kind of giving an explanation for each ABCD for question number 3, but how would you take in all the details and make it so that you can finish this question in 2 minutes?
Yeah, for sure. Well, firstly, just back to the direct salary multiplier. I think that's the same as net multiplier now that I think about it, which I would use the term net multiplier, which is what's used throughout the NCARB resources. And then back to how would I answer a question like this in 2 minutes? I know sometimes folks watch these and I take 10, 12 minutes to go through a question, and it's probably frustrating knowing that you only get 2 or 2.5 minutes, but I'm going through these in detail. You're not going to think through everything that I'm saying in this. I'm going through these to teach. I think really a lot of it comes down to practice and identifying the key terms that you're seeing in this in these questions. So here, whenever you see bullet points, those are going to be super important. My eye kind of goes there. And if you just look quickly at the answer choices, you've got 3 phases of the project in all the answer choices except for A, and you've got 3 bullet points. So those correlate to each other. And then in reality with this question, we looked at the feasibility study first. We determined it should be an hourly rate. B is the only one that has feasibility study with an hourly rate. So you could kind of just stop there and choose B as the correct answer. That might happen, that might not happen, but you might not have to go through every step to answer the question. But yeah, I think if I was to summarize, I would say looking out for some key terms. So when I read prepare feasibility studies for various sites under consideration by owner, various sites is is just that puts a flag to me that this is unknown. I don't know how much time I'm going to spend here, so they're asking me what type of fee structure is appropriate. That's going to be hourly. I've just, in my mind, I've read about this enough and know it well enough that when I see unknown and I'm being asked about a fee structure, it's just hourly. I don't have to think about it. So I think practice makes perfect, and that's the kind of the state that you need to get to take these exams, and that'll help you with speed.
Thanks, Chris. And then one more just around the kind of fee structure part of this. If the fee structure is hourly or hourly not to exceed, how do you know what percentage for retainer to charge for this?
That's a good one. Well, with hourly, yeah, there's not really a percentage for a retainer that you would charge because there's no total fee to apply the percentage to. Typically, well, the other thing I'll say is we shouldn't call them retainers. We should call them initial payments. There's some legal language around retainers where sometimes retainers are like, they can be due back to the client if the project gets canceled or something like that. So we're going to call them initial payments, which is what they're called in the AA documents. For your initial payment, what you want to do is you want to charge an amount that if that's the only thing you ever get paid for this project, you'll have covered the work that you'll have done up to the point where you realize you're not going to get paid anymore, right? That's the best way to think about it. I don't think you're going to get a question on the ARE asking you to figure out an initial payment amount without any more information, without them giving you like, the firm typically charges X percent for initial payments. So, because I think it kind of varies widely, but just the general rule of thumb is just think about it. If you were about to sign up with a client to design, I don't know, a house for them, you knew your total fee was going to be $10,000. Well, I don't know, you might want to get $1,500 as an initial payment, right? That'll cover you to do your initial design work. You present it to the client, and then if they decide not to move forward after that, you know, hopefully you feel well compensated with that $1,500 for the amount of work you did up to that point, and that's a sort of a clean break.
Thanks, Chris. Let's roll on to question number 4 now. Appreciate that.
All right, a project manager is reviewing timesheets for the team members and wants to verify how tasks are categorized as billable or non-billable. Which of the following should be categorized as a non-billable task? Check the 3 that apply. A, preparing renderings for a schematic design presentation. B, preparing a site plan for a response to a request for proposals. C, performing QA/QC for another studio's project. D, attending an OAC meeting for a project under construction. E, taking photos of a completed project for the company website. Or F, leading the firm's ARE preparation group. So this question can come up in a number of different ways. There's sort of endless tasks that could be listed for you to categorize as billable or non-billable. And a next level version of this question could provide you with some time spent on each task and ask you to calculate a utilization rate based on billable and non-billable tasks. So for this one, remember that billable tasks are those tasks that you can directly bill a client for. So think working on a project's drawing sets, attending a project-specific meeting, preparing specs for a project, reviewing submittals during the CA phase, all those types of tasks. Non-billable tasks are literally any other tasks that you might perform during your, the course of your work week or work month or year, ones that your office can't send a client a bill for. So let's go through each of these choices and categorize them. So, and let's remember the question is asking about non-billable tasks. So, and it's a check the 3 that apply. So make sure you read that correctly and you're not checking the billable tasks, and then you would get this incorrect even though you knew the information. So choice A, preparing renderings for an SD presentation. This sounds like it's a project-specific task. It's for an SD presentation. That's almost the definition of a billable task, so that's not going to be correct for this question. Regardless of how you're charging your client, based on the fee structures we talked about for the last question, you would send them a bill in one form or another for that work. Choice B, preparing a site plan for a request for a proposal. Seems very similar to the first choice. It's just a site plan versus a rendering, but the key here is that it's for a request for proposal or RFP. Unless the question states otherwise, I would assume that on the ARE that all RFPs are non-paid. In reality, some RFPs might pay you, a few $1,000s or something to submit, but for the ARE, just assume RFPs are non-paid. So this would be a non-billable task, and that's going to be correct. The next one, performing QA/QC for another studio's project. This is something you'd bill for because it should be part of your firm's project delivery methodology to do quality assurance, quality control, and it should be included in the project's work plan and accounted for. So even if it's not your studio's project, it's a project within your firm, you're going to bill your time to that project for this task of QA/QC, and it's billable to that project. So not correct because we're looking for the non-billable tasks. Choice D, attending an OAC meeting for a project under construction. Again, this is going to be a billable task. You're doing something specific for a project. You're attending an owner, architect, contractor meeting. Your time to do that should be accounted for in your project's work plan, just like we talked about for the QA/QC, and it's going to be billable, so not correct for this one. Photos for your company website. This is a marketing exercise. You're doing this specifically for your company website, so therefore it's not a billable task. If you were taking project record photos for a client or photos during a field visit during construction, that would be different and that would be a billable task, but doing it specifically for the company website is going to make it a not billable task. So you want to look for keys like that here. Just the key company website, to me, when I read it, marketing exercise, non-billable. Finally, leading a firm's ARE prep group, definitely a noble pursuit and something I'd encourage all of you to do or participate in, but not a billable task. It's part of professional development, and therefore it's a correct answer for this question. So I think that means we've got B, E, and F as the correct answers here. Just remember that none of these sometimes people hear these non-billable tasks and I think that they're bad to be spending your time on. It's not necessarily, it's not the case. They're part of being an architect and doing business. Your firm sets your billable rates so that your time spent on those billable tasks covers your time spent on non-billable tasks. So it's all accounted for as long as you're sort of meeting your utilization rate metrics. It's the whole point of the utilization rates and calculating a net multiplier for a firm is so that you can charge enough to pay your firm for these non-billable tasks. If there's no questions there, we can move on to the last one.
Yeah, I think we're all good on that one. Let's roll on to the last question. Thanks.
All right, question 5. A project manager is reviewing their team's timesheets and wants to determine one of the designer's utilization rates for last week. Their time was spent as follows. SD renderings for the Oak Hill School, 20 hours. Gemini Road RFP site plan, 8 hours. QA/QC for the Edgewood Community Center, 5 hours. An OAC meeting at 2511 3rd Avenue, 2.5 hours. Photos for a website at One Park Place, 2.5 hours. And leading the firm's ARE prep group, 2 hours. What is the employee's utilization rate? So this is that next level question that I talked about when we looked at question 4. Essentially the same, and a lot of the choices are actually, or the tasks are the same as we just discussed. You're going to categorize them as billable or non-billable, and then take it one step further and calculate the utilization rate. So let's quickly categorize these tasks. For the sake of time, I'll just kind of explain which are billable, but if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the community and I'm happy to answer them. So of these tasks, there's 3 that are going to be billable. The schematic design renderings at 20 hours, the QA/QC at 5 hours, and the OAC meeting at 2.5 hours. The other tasks are non-billable. So with that, we're looking for a utilization rate. So we're going to take the total billable time and divide it by the total amount of time spent, total hours. That's the formula for utilization rate, billable time over total hours. So all of these tasks here add up to 40 hours total because this timesheet is for a 1-week period. So we can move on to the next slide and I'll go through the math. All right, so like I said, utilization rate, billable hours over total hours. which in this case is 40 hours. So we're going to take our 20 hours for schematic design, 5 hours for QA/QC, and 2.5 hours for the OAC meeting. Add those up, and then divide by 40 hours. So those total 27.5 hours divided by 40 hours is 0.6875, which is 68.75%, or choice B. Some people, when they get to the answer here, 0.6875, they multiply by 100 to turn it into a percentage. You could save yourself like 3 seconds by just recognizing that if you move the decimal point 2 places to the right, you'll essentially do the same thing and get 68.75%. And that's all I've got. Any questions, Patrick?
I think that's all we've got for today. Chris, truly appreciate you helping out today. It's been a pleasure to have you, and thanks for helping support the architecture community.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. If any questions come up afterwards, I'm happy to answer them in our community. Just drop me a line and tag me at Coach Chris Hopstock, and I'll get you an answer.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Chris. If you're joining us for the first time today, Black Spectacles is the leader in ARE prep. We work with learning scientists and architects to ensure that you're studying the right content and that you retain it so you can pass on the first try. Our next ARE Live will be on June 18th, where we'll be covering a PPD mock exam. You can go to blackspectacles.com/podcast to sign up, or you can check our community page where our most recent ARE Live thread that we have right at the top, we have a link for you to join. Over on our Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, we post mock exam questions daily. So if you don't already follow us, I'd suggest that you do. We're at black.spectacles on Instagram and TikTok, and just Black Spectacles on Facebook. And I want to let you know about a couple of our referral programs. We offer a referral program for firms and schools where if you introduce us to your boss or HR, and if they sign up, we'll give you a $250 gift card. To participate, follow the instructions on blackspectacles.com/group-referral. And we also offer a refer a friend program where you can sign up to receive a customized discount code to save your friend 15% off any membership and receive a $50 gift card of your choice when they redeem. You can go to blackspectacles.com/referral to participate. And congratulations to MT Mason. You posted on our community today and you just won a free Black Spectacles t-shirt. I'll reach out to you via email to get your size and shipping information, so I'll be in touch soon. And just a reminder, if you'd like to be eligible to win a t-shirt, post a question you have about our featured topic in our community during our next ARE Live. And our community is always active, not just during ARE Live. So poke around and see what your peers are up to and asking about. In fact, we just launched a new podcast called Licensure Stories, which you can find on our ARE community YouTube channel or your favorite podcasting service, where our founder interviews recently licensed architects to learn about their struggles and successes so you can learn how they did it. You can check out Licensure Stories on our ARE community or YouTube channel. And finally, as a reminder, our next ARE Live will be on June 18th, where we'll be covering a PPD mock exam. You can go to blackspectacles.com/podcast to sign up or check out our community page. And finally, be sure to take our survey, which you'll receive in your email after this episode, and share any suggestions you may have. I promise we read every word that you write and use them to tune our next episodes. Thanks for tuning in.